All right, welcome to the first portion of the Quick Start Guide. Now, when it comes to the brain fog matrix and really addressing that symptom, I would say the first thing you want to do is reducing inflammation. Now, inflammation can be so broad. Really, inflammation or just general fatigue and brain fog, they really can be a number of things. But in this module specifically, we're going to cover inflammation and what can cause inflammation inside the body. So what we're going to cover exactly is, what does brain fog actually feel like? Because I've been asked this a couple times in the course, and some people actually don't know what it truly feels like, and they might be experiencing something and they want to make sure it's really brain fog and not something else. So we're going to go over that, as well as discuss a range of items that can cause inflammation in the body, resulting in the sensation of brain fog, because brain fog is really just the result of something else causing inflammation inside your body. So we're going to go over a couple topics explaining that, and then also the solutions to fix it. So what does brain fog really feel like? Now, I would say there's many metaphors to explain what the dreaded brain fog feels like, but the definition of what brain fog is it's a term used for certain symptoms that can affect your ability to think. So you may feel confused or disorganized, or find it hard to focus or put your thoughts into actual words. Now, I would say most people feel like this first thing in the morning. Very rarely do I have people who have chronic brain fog throughout the entire day. It does happen, but primarily it happens first thing upon waking up. Usually people wake up and they feel disorientated. They can't really talk to anyone the first, hour or so of waking up. They feel like they have a metaphysical almost cloud in their head where they have to break through this physical barrier around their brain, trying to actually form thoughts and think in a concise manner. Maybe another metaphor is you feel like you're running in hip-high water. So running should be something that is fluent. Everyone knows how to do it. It should be a smooth motion. But when you have brain fog, it almost feels like you're running through water and your actions are slowed down. So even though you want to run or you want to walk, you can't. And you have to fight the resistance of the water, or in this case, the fog that's around your brain and your thinking. Now, I would say step one in reducing inflammation, especially systematic inflammation, is looking at the possible culprits. And so the first one I would say is food sensitivities. Now, this could be just generic foods that I think no one should be eating, as well as individual foods. So that's your part in this, where you need to discover what works with your body and what doesn't. Now, I'm just going to dive right in and just explain the foods that could be causing your brain fog. Now, these are the foods that I recommend no one under any circumstances eat. And if you're especially feeling brain fog, definitely check these items out. So bread and pasta and processed grains. So gluten, that's a huge one. I notice when people have a very high carb meal, especially that is primarily gluten or wheat or grain, I notice a huge spike in brain fog, either a couple hours after eating or the next day. So I've had some clients where they'll have, a cheat meal. Let's say they have half a pizza or however much pizza. They say that they're out of office for the next couple days. And I truly think it's because they have risen inflammation from this bread and pasta. There's studies showing that specifically bread, pasta, gluten, grains, they actually irritate the gut lining, so the epithelial lining of the gut, and those are tight junctions that should be closed always, almost like a gate to a castle. They should always be closed no matter what, but gluten specifically has been known to open those junctions, so open the gate to the castle, and that lets the bad guys in, and that leads to inflammation. Now, there's actually more recent studies showing that it does the same thing to the blood-brain barrier. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically the same sort of barrier between your gut and the outside world, but for your brain. So your brain has a very tightly controlled membrane that is super picky with what it allows in and out. And gluten circulating the system, once it gets past the gut, can actually migrate up to the blood-brain barrier, allowing those junctions to open, which can result in systematic inflammation and brain fog that could last almost a couple days. And processed oils. So processed oils would be trans fats and cookies and cakes, as well as vegetable oils. So if you're getting, let's say, ketchup or mayonnaise or any sort of condiment or sauce, even fruit juice, You have to be really tricky with these processed oils because they are literally in everything. I always check the labels. Now, I'm not super fanatic and I make sure it's absolutely clean all the way around, but really when I'm looking at labels, every label I look at, I'm looking for vegetable oils. So that could pop up as soy, corn, canola, trans fats, hydrogenated oils. So really the only fats you should be consuming are animal fats or saturated fats. Any packaged food, anything like that will most likely contain these really bad oils. And low-grade dairy. So a lot of the times when people say they're lactose intolerant, they are lactose intolerant to the really low-grade dairies. And what I mean by low-grade, a factory farm, so some sort of farm that is in a shed where the cows don't get any sunlight, they're treated very poorly, they're in a very stressed environment, and the milk is ultra pasteurized, killing all the beneficial bacteria and enzymes, things that help our digestion actually break down the milk molecules. So I'd say low-grade dairy as well as low-grade meat. So if you're looking at lunch meat or processed meat, make sure it is grass-fed, pasture-raised, as well as not have any preservatives in it. So I would say the reason why bacon gets a bad name is because a lot of pigs and a lot of pork products have been known to be fed soy and corn and all these grains that you don't want them to be eating on a daily basis, as well as being preserved with nitrates. So nitrates can be a huge inflammatory marker for our gut as well. And artificial sweeteners. So this could be aspartame, sucralose, high fructose corn syrup. So artificial sweeteners are absolutely terrible for our system. One reason being is because our gut is so intelligent and smart that when we're about to eat a meal, we can actually smell the aroma of the foods. And this is primarily for fruit, oranges, sugars. We smell the sugar, and so certain enzymes and substances in our gut start preparing for the arrival of those sugars. But when we eat artificial sweeteners or high fructose corn syrup, it's not what our body was expecting, and those enzymes, those misfired enzymes, can cause a lot of damage in our gut when we're not actually eating those sugars. So if you're going to have sugar, definitely have the real thing. So real fruit, real white sugar. Yes, you can have white sugar, obviously in moderation. We don't want to have too much and always with the protein, but usually the artificial sweeteners are way worse than real sugar itself. And then alcohol, of course, we all know this. If you have a night out drinking and you're not drinking enough water, you're not replenishing your electrolytes, you'll definitely have that sensation of brain fog. And nutritional deficiencies. So you could be doing all the right things, but you might just be missing a couple things in your diet. Now, a couple of those vitamins I recommend that you really focus on are basically all of the B vitamins. So B12, B9, B1, B3, folate, D3, and magnesium. So minerals in general are super important, especially magnesium. And you might be wondering where you can get some of these nutrients. Really, if you focus on beef liver, eggs, oysters, orange juice, pasture-raised, grass-fed beef, carrots, potatoes, all of these things are very, very high in nutrients and will cover most of these basics. So now that you know what foods not to eat and what foods to actually focus on to make sure you're getting the right nutrients, the last and final step I would recommend as a broad spectrum of addressing inflammation, systematic inflammation, would be addressing your gut health. So we could be doing all the right things, but a lot of researchers actually preach, and I agree with this, is that you are not what you eat. You are what you can absorb. So sometimes you get an individual where they're doing all the right things, they're crossing their T's, dotting their I's, they're eating all the right foods, but sometimes their gut just needs a little bit extra help to actually help them absorb it. And there's a very basic protocol you can do to support your gut health. Now, if you haven't heard of the gut-brain axis, basically it's a very tightly controlled connection between our gut, the vagus nerve, our brain. It's very intertwined, and if you've ever had that gut feeling or some sort of gut sensation to do something else, and you're like, oh, I should have listened to my gut. Well, there's actually a reason for that. They call our gut the second brain. Our gut actually has more neurons in our stomach, in our small intestine, than our spine does. And it's about 100 million neurons. So next time you get that gut feeling, make sure you listen to it, because a lot of the times it's unbiased, because with our prefrontal cortex and everything else going on in our brain, sometimes we think too much with our heart, with our emotions, and we're not actually looking at the facts. And our second brain, our gut, doesn't have that emotional bias. So definitely listen to it the next time you get that sensation. But just like how our brain and gut are intertwined, so is the relationship of inflammation. So if our gut is not doing well, so is our brain and the rest of our body. So just some quick tips in order to support a healthy gut, again, in a very general basis. All of these things are very individual. We're all different. So every one of us will approach this information differently. Just make sure you experiment with it. But as a general rule, what you want to do to support your gut is eliminate all the food sensitivities. So going back to this list, make sure you're not having any of these on a daily basis. And then drink bone broth every day. Bone broth is absolutely incredible for our villi, which are the little carpet-like fingers inside of our gut that are always taking up and absorbing nutrients. So bone broth is filled with minerals, it's filled with collagen, it's filled with gelatin, and those are all made up of amino acids, which basically heal the gut lining. And then take a spore probiotic. Now this is super important. The reason why I put little asterisks next to it is because a spore probiotic is different than just any old regular probiotic. Spore means that it comes from the ground and it's trapped in little dirt particles, and that makes it's resistant to a lot of our environment. So wind, rain, stomach acid. One thing with your probiotics is you want to make sure it gets to the actual small intestine so it can actually colonize and grow. So I recommend everyone to take a probiotic. And then the last and final thing is to minimize vegetable intake and up your protein. And the reason for this is because all vegetables are made out of cellulose, and as humans, we physiologically cannot break down cellulose. So if we can't break down the vegetable matter, then it's just kind of going right through us. And if we're eating too many vegetables, it can definitely irritate the gut lining, whereas protein is a lot easier for our body to digest. The amino acids can actually help repair the gut lining. This concludes the step 1 in troubleshooting brain fog. I'll see you guys in the next module of heavy metal toxicity.